Thank you so much, Jess. Jess is also an author of DBA Tools in a Month of Lunches, which you can get at dbatools.io/book. And in addition, there's like a 50% off somewhere on YouTube. So if you do a search for DBA Tools in a Month of Lunches, that code still works. And so thank you so much, Jess. I appreciate it. So in today's session is getting started with GitHub Actions starring SQL Server on Linux, PowerShell, and SQL CMD. And as I was doing my presentation, the demo just one time, I also realized that I'm going to be showing you GitHub Copilot, which is literally one of the coolest technologies that I have seen in my 20-year career. And in this session, because it's like Dataverse and it's different, I have a problem with perfectionism and being like super polished during presentations. So I haven't practiced all that much. I have practiced enough to bring you a hopefully a professional presentation, but I will give up some of the control, let the audience and moderator control the GitHub action that we'll be creating, and we'll see how that works out. So thank you for joining me on this journey. As Jess mentioned, my name is Chrissy LeMaire. I'm a dual Microsoft MVP awarded for my work in both SQL Server and PowerShell. And it's so good to be back at a SQL Server conference. I had done other types of conferences in the past, but this always just kind of feels like home to me. And I'm also a GitHub star, which is essentially kind of like an MVP of GitHub. You can find me on Twitter. I am at CL. If you have any questions about this presentation, I'll be happy to take them either during the demo or afterwards on Twitter. So today I'm going to be talking about GitHub Actions, which is a platform to automate organizational and developer workflows. And as I was trying to explain and build this presentation to explain what they are, I had a bit of a hard time. So what I decided was I was going to show GitHub's formal definition for GitHub Action and then tell you how I got involved. So GitHub Actions, it's an API for cause and effect on GitHub. It allows you to orchestrate any workflow based on any event while GitHub manages the execution using these little VMs called runners, provides really nice, rich feedback, and it secures every step along the way. And with GitHub Actions, workflows and steps are just code in a repository, so you can create, share, reuse, and fork your entire software development practices. Now, the way that I got involved, oops, I don't know what happened there, that's wild. So the way that I got involved with GitHub Actions is whenever it first came out, I always like to try things. And I really like my things to all be in one place. And with DBA Tools, the project that I work on GitHub, we have AppVeyor, which is a third-party tool, and that provides this whole CI/CD process. But then GitHub put out their own CI/CD process. I was really excited. And the first thing that I did was I created just a little tiny, I didn't want to get all involved. So I created a workflow that would spin up a Windows runner, a Linux runner, and a Mac OS runner. And all of them would import DBA tools and run a single command that I knew worked across the board and didn't require a SQL Server. And that would ensure that our module would compile on all of these three different platforms, no matter or with the change that was pushed to the repository. So if somebody pushed a change, if they did something that broke that process, then we would know immediately and we wouldn't have to get that feedback from end users. And then I kind of was hands off. I went back to AppVeyor. And then in August of 2020, it was Sander Stott reached out to me and he was like, Chrissy, I'm doing the awesomest things with SQL Server. I'm actively testing my T-SQL using T-SQL-T, which is a unit tester for T-SQL. And I'm doing it against a container. And whenever I saw that, I was so excited. I went and I looked at his code And then I didn't immediately jump into SQL Server because at the time I was working with APIs. But what I did was I took a container that I found online and I spun it up, and then I was able to execute the PowerShell commands that I was working on against those containers. And I thought that it was really, really cool, and it opened a lot of possibilities for me. So this is essentially, you remember during GitHub's formal definition, they talked about how it's just some code in your repository. And this is what it looks like to execute code against a live SQL server using SQL CMD. So we'll go line by line. So first we can see the name. So that's test SQL CMD against a SQL Server container. And then I selected push and pull requests. So anytime somebody pushes changes to the repository or performs a pull request that asks us to merge their code into our own, every time that this happens, this workflow is going to run. And then we have jobs. I named my job run tests. And then I set it to runs on Ubuntu latest. And so you could pick Ubuntu latest, you could pick Windows latest, or you could pick Mac OS latest. And with this top part, honestly, I just copy and paste every single time. I don't memorize any of this. Next up is the steps. I found out while practicing or creating the code for this presentation, I was like, well, I'm not actually using any of the code in my repository, so I'll just remove that. And it turns out it is absolutely necessary. So you just copy paste from somebody's repository and say uses actions checkout to. Next is the name. So you don't have to name every single step, but I really like it because as you're watching it happen, it'll show you the name of the step. So in this step, we want to download and start the container. And I don't know if you're familiar with SQL Server on Linux. It's really a lot like Windows or running SQL Server on Windows. And you can find out more at aka.ms/SQL containers. And essentially what I did was I went to this web page and I copied and pasted this code and put it into a run. So I say run this Docker container. It'll automatically download if you perform a run on a container that doesn't exist locally. I tell it to accept the end user license agreement. I set my SA password to dbatoolstest. I expose that common port that we're used to, port 1433, and then I tell it to go and get SQL Server 2019 latest. And then from there, once this runs, and sometimes you have to throw in a start sleep for like 5 seconds, but once it's running, you can actually run any SQL Server command against that. So in this case, what we're doing is we're running SQL CMD against localhost. We're setting our SA user account and password, and setting the database to TempDB. I love working out of TempDB for demos. And then what we're doing is we're passing this tests.sql, which could be anything that you would like. Now, it's a little bit different whenever it comes to running PowerShell commands, because as you can see here, SQL CMD is built into the runner, so we didn't have to go out and get it. And with PowerShell, there's a little bit of differences. So we have the name test DBA tools against SQL Server container on push or pull request. So it's still the same thing. If somebody's pushing a change to the repository, or if they're performing a pull request, then run this workflow. We have the default. So by default, GitHub Actions runs bash. And in this case, we want to change our shell to be PowerShell or push. Push is PowerShell version 7, and it's going to run against Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. It's available on all 3 of those platforms. And then we set up our jobs. This looks familiar, right? We're running tests. We're running on Ubuntu. We're setting up those steps. We download and run our Docker container. And in this case, we are installing DBA tools. And whenever I was first creating it, I was like, sweet, let's run right into install module DBA tools. But it turns out that, and I think that this is the right thing, by default, the PS gallery isn't trusted. So you have to be explicit about that. So you set your PS repository, PS gallery to trusted, and then you can install the module from there. Once you do that, then you go into the next one. You'll notice that little pipe, right? This thing right here. This says I'm about to run multiple lines of code. Whenever we look here, it's just run on all one line. That's just saying I have just one thing to do. But if you have multiple lines of code that you want to run, then you throw in that pipe. And at the bottom, we'll see test against the SQL Server container. With DBA tools, we don't like to have insecure passwords at the command line, so we don't allow it. But in this case, you can force it to create a secure string, and then from there create a credential, and then you essentially run that exact same thing but using our syntax. So you say invoke DBA query, you specify your SQL instance to localhost because we exposed those ports at port 1433. And then you specify your SQL credential and you run that file. So this is essentially the PowerShell equivalent of what's being done here. Now, whenever you have these workflows, once you push that workflow out to the GitHub repository, you just click on the Actions tab and it'll start running there. You can click on each of these links and it gives you more details and shows the steps and the results of those steps. And that's something that we'll be watching in our demo. All right, so for the use cases, why would you want to use SQL Server and PowerShell on GitHub? For us in the DBA tools community, I love that we have so many tests. Every single time that somebody makes a change against our repository, it runs thousands of tests to make sure that the behavior is still as expected. So one of the use cases is testing new commits so that you can rest easy knowing that changes proposed in a pull request won't break your project and they won't break that kind of promise that you make with the end users. Also, you can update your SQL database deployments using DAC packs and backpacks, maybe. You can also update your database with data sources such as screen scrapes or remote repositories. I actually have this project called KB Update that performs a screen scrape of the Windows Update catalog, and it stores that into a SQL-like database, and I can run that on a scheduled task because that is one of the events that you can do. In addition to pushes, in addition to pull requests, you can also do scheduled tasks using this. Also, if you want to automate tedious tasks like documentation or release notes updates, that's something that we've done with DBA tools. Now all I have to do is just execute a workflow. It'll go out, it'll do every single thing that I need, including updating docs.dbatools.io. You can also, like I mentioned before, build projects against Linux, against Windows, and against Mac OS if you're building a cross-platform solution to ensure that it continues working. If you are building a .NET project and you want to test against the nightly releases of .NET, you can do that as well. And this is super cool. GitHub can actually check your code for passwords and vulnerabilities. If you work with things like NPM, I recently created a VS Code extension and I started using NPM, and this thing called Dependabot will actually say, hey, that's a vulnerable version of the tool that you're using. Here's a pull request. Please merge it in and it'll upgrade it to a compatible version that is no longer vulnerable. So I mentioned earlier that you can run a workflow against any GitHub event, and this is pretty much an exhaustive list of all of the events. So you can see we talked about schedules. You also have something called a workflow dispatch, which is basically saying, I want to run this right now. Don't run it at any other time. Don't run it on a schedule. Don't run it if somebody pushes to the repository. But you can go through all of these, which to me, whenever I see this, I'm like, man, there's so many opportunities here to use automation within my project. So when it comes to support and runners, we talked about before how it supports Linux runners, Mac OS, Windows, some little containers, and also if you have a little Pi that you want to execute your code against, then you can also do self-hosted containers which support the ARM platform. In addition to supporting PowerShell and SQL CMD, there's also Node, Python, Java, Ruby, PHP, Go, Rust, .NET, and more. I even looked it up, and COBOL is even supported on these runners. So there's just a ton of power and opportunity here. And while I was creating this presentation, I didn't even realize at the time that there's a whole bunch of SQL Server centric stuff that's included in the runners. So we'll go ahead and take a look at it. And I'm also going to check my time. All right. Okay. So we have the client tools. Client tools are things like SQL CMD, BCP, the ODBC drivers. That's already included on the Linux runner, which is why we didn't have to install anything extra. We just jumped right into it. SQL package is unfortunately not included on the Linux OS. And also the SQL Server module. So you could use dbatoolstest, which is from the community, or you can use Microsoft's official PowerShell module called SQL Server. That is not included on the Linux OS. However, if you spin up a Windows runner, that is included along with SQL CMD, BCP, and the ODBC drivers. You will have to, if you want to use SQL package, it's not on any of the runners. You'll have to install that manually. And you can see Mac OS, there's just like, it's kind of barren for our needs. There's not a lot of focus on SQL Server within the Mac OS runner. I thought this was awesome too. I was really excited, right? So I set up this dbatoolstest SQL Server in SQL Server, what's it called? The SQL Server, Azure SQL Server. I had set up a SQL Server in Azure, and I was really excited to find out that if you change this setting, if you do have SQL servers out in Azure, if you say allow Azure services and resource to access this server, that includes GitHub runners. So we actually have that within the dbatoolstest repository that we execute commands against our dbatoolstest SQL Server out in Azure, and we didn't have to configure any additional IPs or anything like that. So I know what you're thinking. Oh my God, this is so powerful. It must cost a ton. And the answer is that it absolutely does not. It's totally free for public repositories. You can run as many workflows as you like, as many GitHub Actions as you like. You could spend the whole time just running actions all month. It costs nothing. Now, when you go to private repositories, there are usage limitations. So at the free tier, you have this like 500 megs of storage and 2,000 Linux minutes. So I called them Linux minutes. GitHub doesn't. Linux minutes is like the baseline minute, right? And then a Windows minute is like 2 times the Linux minute. So you only get 1,000 Linux minutes per month if you're running Windows runner. And if you're running a Mac runner, then that is, it's pretty severe. It's like a 10th. We'll check it out in the next slide. So if you have a pro account, which I think is like $6 a month, I could be wrong on that, you get 1 gig of storage and then 3,000 Linux minutes. And again, this is just for private repositories. If all your stuff is public, then you don't even have to worry about any of this. So if you go beyond that free tier, it's going to cost a super minimal amount for Linux per minute. Mac OS is a whopping 8 cents a minute, and then Windows is less than that. Again, only for the private repos. So in addition, we had talked about these workflows, right? They're just workflows or files within your repository. There are also these reusable actions that are also called actions. So I like to differentiate them by calling one thing a workflow and one thing an action. And there's an actions marketplace that you can go too, I know that I went and I typed in SQL CMD hoping that somebody had created something to automatically install SQL CMD, but there wasn't anything at the time, so I created it for this presentation, which we'll see in a bit. But there's also some PowerShell actions that do, if you're a PowerShell centric kind of person, then there's things like an automatic cacher where it doesn't go out to the PowerShell gallery over and over. And so this is a really cool thing that we'll be looking into as well. If you want to simplify portions of your workflow down into like just a simple little line of code. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. And by the way, I am now open for questions as we start the demo. Do we have any questions? Oh, I see a little chat.
No questions yet, but if you have them, folks, throw them in the chat and we'll collect them up.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I'm perfectly on time. So what I'm going to do...
we do have one question right before we get in. It's a very important one too. Rob's come in. He says,
hey!
What's your favorite cheese?
What's that?
What's your favorite cheese?
You know, there is a new, oh my God, I would have to yell and ask Lou, but it's currently one from Britain. Lancashire, is that how y'all pronounce it?
Yeah.
It's super orange. And it has and it almost tastes like blue cheese and cheddar had a baby. Lancashire is my favorite cheese currently because it does change.
Perfect. Rob says that's where he was born, so he is excited about you loving his
That's incredible.
home cheese.
I can't wait. Some hometown cheese. You know, like all I have is gumbo from my hometown, and so I'd be pretty proud to have some hometown cheese. I love that, Rob. Thank you for sharing. Ooh, I wonder if the Lancashire that I get from the grocery store is different from the one that y'all get in England. So maybe whenever we all hang out, we could like have a cheese tasting.
There's only one way to find out.
I know, right? Oh my God, I'm so excited. Something to look forward to and hope for.
Perfect.
So what I'm going to do for this demo that I've practiced literally once because I'm trying to keep that perfectionism down then I enjoyed it. And that's why I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this once. Because I know whenever I'm learning about something new, I want to know like from the very beginning. So I'm literally going to create a repository within my GitHub and go from there and show you how it is that I create new actions and workflows. So I'm going to create new, and I will say Dataverse demo, and then description. We'll do it live. All right, I'm keeping that to public, so all of my stuff is going to be super free. I always initialize a GitHub repository. Otherwise, you have to do something weird and like initialize it after the fact. No thanks. So I'm going to add that README, choose a license. I like MIT. And then I'm going to create this repository. I know that I build command line tools, but I also love GUIs and you know, like GitHub or Git in general, I find is a hard enough concept to grasp without introducing a lack of visibility. So all that to say, I use GitHub Desktop and I love it. So let's go ahead and open with GitHub Desktop. I'll save it there in my GitHub path. Sweet. All right. This is exciting. So I'm going to create a new branch. Right now, my main branch is empty. And I want to say that this is my initial branch that I'm going to work in. And so right now, you see where it's prompting me to publish the branch? That means that right now it's only on my computer. It's not yet out on GitHub. And, you know, while I'm here, I would like to show y'all how this works. Okay, in case you're not familiar with it. So we just have main. But if I publish this branch to GitHub, and I don't have any changes, so it's not going to look drastically different. But now, once I refresh, oops. Now, ooh, there's an initial branch, so we could see what's going on there. And if I add anything, which I'm about to, then we'll see it appear here in this branch. Another thing that I love is open in Visual Studio Code. Sweet. I don't even have to like figure it out. I just do it. Okay, so now we have this README and we have our license. And what I would like to do is I'm just going to copy, because that's what I do. That's literally what I do every single time. Is whenever I'm starting a new project, I'll just go to one of my other projects and I'll copy and paste some code there. So let's open the command prompt. Oh, wait, no, not the command prompt. Let's show an Explorer. So now you can see I'm going to create a folder called .github. So if you're wondering about that dot, in Linux, if by default dots are excluded from the list command, and so that's probably why they did that. Just kind of, it makes it look clean, because this is really like metadata information, right? It's not actually my project. It's just things that help my project. And then I'm going to create a folder called workflows. And then I'm going to create a YAML file. And I'm not going to lie, this is how I do it. I feel like I do it from the 80s, but we'll still do it anyway. Okay, you can name it whatever you want. So whatever.yaml. Yes, and then I'm going to go here. Let me know if the size is good for everybody. Okay, so now we have a blank YAML, and I'm going to go to another repository like github.com, SQL Collaborative, dbatoolstest. I'll just go take from myself. So here we have GitHub, workflows. Look, we got a couple workflows happening, right? And let me know if this is this big enough for everyone to see, or would you like me, like I could do, there we go. All right, CI sounds good. Oh, tests. All right. I'm hoping I tweeted the CEO of GitHub, and I'm really hoping for a little copy here, because that would be awesome. But until then, we can manually copy. And I'm not going to do the whole thing because, you know, I mean, even though I did the whole thing before, but we're going to learn together and go step by step. So let's see where I want to stop. You know what? I want to go all the way up to set up Docker images. So you can see here, name cross-platform test. It's only on push. Okay. You want to know what's really cool? If we delete this and then save it. Okay, I will say on my own, whatever, something happened on this, got corrupt. It shows this, the file is empty. That's not true. But I'm just going to say initial commit. And then after that, y'all will be able to see my differences. So now I've pushed that branch out to GitHub. And we're going to go take a look. GitHub, potato quality, Dataverse demo. Oh, you know what? Let's just go to Dataverse demo. So again, we'll go and we'll look at initial. Now there's some stuff in there because I just pushed it out to GitHub. Whatever. Let's see if it works. Let's see if you could base. Ooh, it did. All right. So for our initial commit, if you remember earlier in the presentation, I was like, you just click actions. So we have this run cross-platform tests, and that's the same as run cross-platform tests, right? So far, we're looking good. It's green. The first time I tried this presentation, I used only what GitHub Copilot suggested to me, and I just had a bunch of red until it worked. So I was like, I mean, it felt great whenever it finally worked, but we're going to start out with some work in, and then we'll see how it goes throughout here. All right. So now we have these steps, uses, and I would like to go get a Docker container. So the first thing I'm going to do is look up SQL Server Docker containers. No, I don't want to go to the Docker Hub because I need to know more. Right? I need to know what Microsoft is going to tell me about this Docker container. So I was doing it on my own computer, but instead of doing it on my own computer, I'm going to do it on GitHub's computer. So I could just Docker pull this, That would work. Y'all want to see it work? All right, let's do it. I'm not going to lie. A lot of times, hey, thank you. So what you're seeing is GitHub Copilot in action. It's suggesting what my next step will be. And a lot of times it's magical. It's beyond magical. If you go to my Twitter at twitter.com/CL and look for anything GitHub Action, GitHub Copilot, I lose my mind constantly over this thing. I don't want to do that. Let's see. Name setup Docker. Oh, I don't know. So that what it's suggesting is an action. It's like a rebuildable action, but that's disorienting. It's disorienting for me. So, oh, you know what I need to do? I need to not do this. And I think that this might work. Docker pull. So this is just going to pull it. It's not going to actually run it, but let's see. You could see it used to say this, and now it says this, and now I'm going to give it a good commit. I wish that, oh, you can. That's nice. I didn't even know that. Okay, so now I know. All right, add Docker pull, commit to initial. And whenever I create a new workflow with GitHub, seriously, it's hundreds of runs. But I kind of like seeing things work as they go, and I do get a dopamine hit whenever there's some green that comes up. So we'll watch these tests happen. So you could see setup job, run actions checkout, setup Docker. Here's the output. It's really cool. If you've ever done this on your own computer, you know that this is just another computer doing it for you. It usually takes about 45 seconds. I will say one thing that I don't like is it looks like it's been running for 1 minute and 24 seconds, but it hasn't. It's just that my time is off with GitHub's time, and it shows it in that way. So we can see here, this is what it looked like. So it went and it got it, and it's successful. I'm not going to lie, I'm being a little bit conservative here, cautious. I'm not doing anything that's going to break it, but let's get wild and potentially break this run flow. Okay, so I want to go here. That's not what I want. I don't want that one. So, because this is kind of advanced, right? Like I'm setting up some very special Dockers. I want to get the public Docker from Microsoft. Ooh, here's some code. All right, let's do it. Now, if you remember before, we're going to remove that line. That's all in one line. We're going to put a pipe, and that says, you have to do 2. And that says that I'm going to run multiple lines of code. Even if you don't, it's fine. So I usually just default to a pipe. All right, so I want dbatoolstest. Nope. Tool. Nope. .io. Is it I0? I don't know. We'll see. Okay. And then this is straight from Microsoft site, so it should work. All right, so we're going to accept the EULA. We're going to set our password to that, and then we're going to set the name to SQL1, the host name to SQL1. So one is like the name of the Docker container. The other one is like the network host name, and that will be the latest. And then the next thing that I want to do, let's test out GitHub Copilot and see how smart it's going to be. I want to, I don't remember what the YAML comment is. Is it that? Does anybody remember, is it this or is it that? I think it might be a pound. Okay, so what we're going to say is execute SQL CMD against the container. Okay, name run test. All right, let's do it. Run. Ooh, good so far. Oops. That. Oh, you know what? Here's a bug. Okay, so I will have to type it in. Whenever I hit the key, it's not actually like making it come to fruition, and that sometimes happens. Because it's currently, so Copilot is, it's a VS Code extension that is available, but your account has to have access to it. So it's not available for everyone, but you could sign up probably at copilot.github.com. And it's really, really incredible once he gets past this. Come on, let's do this. Run pipe, and then, I mean, that could possibly work. It looks reasonable, doesn't it? So we have Docker exec, but that's executing SQL CMD within the container. I like that it has -s. That is accurate. So is U and P and Q. All of that is true. All right, I'm not going to accept. I am going to SQL CMD and then see. Boom. What? All right, so I was fooled before. This looks totally valid, but I don't know if it's gonna. Can anybody guess if this is gonna run? It looks like it, right? But why did I run into so many problems before? Here we have SA, we have dbatoolstest.io, we have localhost, and we have a query, select one. I think that this is gonna run, but I thought that before whenever it failed a bunch of times. So, all right, let's add an extra, add a query. So I just committed that, so it's in my little database that I made a change, and I'm going to push it out to GitHub. Now we're going to go look at GitHub to see if this runs. Go to Actions. This will take 45 seconds. So during that time, I could take some questions. I could take some requests. This is a DJ session if you would like me to query a specific query, or if you have a question about this. Open to it. How we looking?
I don't know if it's anything in particular to do with this, but I read somewhere something about go on GitHub and press the period button.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so that is cool. That is a separate GitHub thing. Let's see. So if you go to GitHub, no, let me go to dbatoolstest.io/PR. So what William is talking about is you can actually go to a PR, and then if you press the dot, it'll bring up a VS Code web editor where you can actually look at this. You can modify. This is DBA tools right here, right? And you can modify anything in this just as if you were using VS Code locally. You can make your change. You can push it to GitHub. And oh, look at this. It's all built in nicely. This is actually the first time that I've tried it. So this is incredible. So if we want to make, you know, that's somebody else's PR. Oops. That's somebody else's PR. And so I'm not going to mess with it, but I could if I wanted to, and then we can just, you know, do everything from there. So ultimately, oh, look how cool. It even has, this is the author, Andreas. He's also from like just down the street. We live right around Frankfurt. And we actually met for lunch, which is really cool. And this is his PR. And so I could make my own additions, or I could create my own PR and make changes from there as well. So you no longer need VS Code installed locally on your own computer. You could just go to github.com, press dot, and it'll open it up. So nice.
That is super cool.
I know, right? Ooh, look at this. Did anybody guess this, that it was going to fail? Oh, I love this. Oh my God, it's a perfect, what needed to happen was, so whenever you jump from here to here, you don't necessarily need sudo, and that's not what broke it. We could do Docker run without it, but there are some things that do require it that are like usually to do with encryption. But what we needed, and look at that, it already has the pipe, so I could just go and I could just sleep 10. Now, oh, I set my shell to push, so I could use some PowerShell. Delicious. So start sleep 10, and then the next time that I run it, I expect that I'll be able to log in. So that's just something that sometimes happens with containers, that you try to query them before they're finished setting up entirely, and it fails that way. So let me go add this, add a sleep. Each of these are called commits. Something I want to show, just for anybody who's not familiar with Git, I loved it whenever I first realized this. So you see how we have this Dataverse demo. You go here. It's a very visual thing, right? I know it's kind of squished. So I want to show you like the concept of workspaces. When I changed to main, the main workspace it was just that empty workspace. So that GitHub folder is going to disappear. Right? Oh, what? And then if I do initial, then it's going to come back. And this is like whenever it finally kind of like meshed in my head that this is what source control is all about, I finally got it. And it really took Windows Explorer plus like the ability to just change stuff in a GUI to be like, oh, I get it. Okay. So if I add files here, and then you submit a pull request to actually merge that together. So that really blew my mind. But so we'll go back to this. We're back on initial, and I submitted that change. So let's go to actions. Yeah. All right. So this really shows more of my workflow of how there's going to be failures and then there's going to be successes. And this is just like, it's delicious to me. I love it. So we added a sleep. Microsoft Docs unable to resolve resource dependency. Oh no. Oh, that's interesting, Rob. So he's talking about whenever you press that dot on the doc, yeah, in code spaces. I think that there are a couple things that still need to be, like there is a limitation. You don't have a full-on PowerShell environment or, you know, like all of the extensions that you need. But I know that Justin Grote, G-R-O-T-E, Grote, sorry. He does a lot of work with that, and he had wanted to add some extras for PowerShell, so I'm looking forward to that. All right, so we have this where we set up our Docker using the Microsoft Docs, and we successfully performed. You know what? We actually didn't look at the output of SQL CMD, so what we're expecting is something that we're super familiar with. And I know that we're not running tests right now, but this just builds us the platform to do those tests. So we could see that we have one here, and you know what? As one, and then I'm just going to push this real quick, name column, because this also helps us see, and you know, explicitly named column. And then we push that out. And this is, and I do make little jumps along the way, which is some of my projects will have 500 commits in the initial commit before I get it going. Now, earlier I had talked about GitHub Actions, right, which are these reusable workflows. So this is a workflow, and then you have these actions. And what we will do is we'll go and look at the Actions marketplace because it does really save a lot of time. It's kind of like having pre-made software available for you. So let's go ahead and first see if that new thing, I love watching tests. I'm not gonna lie. Let's see while I do this. All right, we have 44. All right, so now we could see that we named it 1. Ooh, all right, real quick. If I wanted to create a secret, if you go to settings and then secrets, you can say new repository secret, and I'll say SA password, and then the value is dbatoolstest.io. This is 0i0. This is a repository secret. Nobody could see it except for you. As a matter of fact, you can't even see it once it's done. I'm going to paste that there. You can only update or remove it. So, and then you can access it using environmental variables. And I don't remember how to do that. So let's go back here to dbatoolstest, and hopefully we have some environmental variables, kind of. So let's see, we'll replace runs on Ubuntu latest. Oh, it was already here. All right, so we'll say SA password secrets, SA password. Did it take it and change the casing? I don't think that the casing super matters, but I'm going to do it anyway. All right. So we're going to do that, and then what's cool is that if you set it up here at the top, like you could set it for each of your steps and it'll be explicit to that one step. But instead, I'm going to create it here at the top. It'll be available to all of my steps, and it's env. So how does that work with PowerShell syntax? Let's do env sa. Hey, what happened? env sa password. Because, no, sorry, y'all. I'm just going to do it uppercase right there. So we have env sa password is secrets sa password. And then we'll set this right here to env sa password. And then I do need to do it here. And once I do this, you won't be able to see my password because GitHub will actually replace it with some little stars. So that's how we can remove that there. So sa password, env password, env password. It looks like this is going to work. Let's go ahead and try.
Chrissy, on line 17, is that to bring the variable into that step, or is that a misfire?
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. That would have just broke everything. Okay. Yeah, it was like my pasting went wild. I guess I didn't do it right. Okay, so we have here, 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 there. Thank you, Jess. Remove clear text password. Add repo secret. So we added it on the repo itself. You can do this using some VS Code extensions, but I'm not into it. I really like their web page. I just want to create it there.
While those tests run, I've got a good question for you from Peter. He said, can you mark a secret as sensitive so you couldn't like echo
Correct.
SA password or something from within an action?
Correct. So anytime, and we'll see this happen in here, secrets are marked as sensitive by default if they're in the secret, and you can even mark variables as sensitive within your YAML code. So secrets will always be XXX'd out, and you can also XXX out some other variables if you like. Sweet, check it out right there, boom. So we could see that. Now it is possible if you, with DBA tools, we have so many contributors and we actually, we sign our module, and this code signing certificate is very expensive and very important. And it would be possible, because I stored them in secrets, for our contributors to say, it won't show it here, but maybe what they could do is echo it out to some random web page, right? And then get our base 64 and kind of reverse engineer and put our certificate back together. So if you have a severe secret that cannot be shared with other people in your organization, which is really rare, but for me, like, I did share it with Rob and Jess and Sean, this certificate, but that's it. What I do is I actually store that in my own private repository. And so it's my own account, and it's a private repository, and I know that anybody that I add as a contributor to that repository would be able to get that. So right now it's just me. Although Rob, Sean, and Jess would be able to recreate this on their own if I were to die. So I hope yeah, so some people, some organizations trust everybody in their contributors list. I do with DBA tools to an extent. I think there's like, oh yeah, I'll show you what DBA tools uses. It's our Azure stuff. If somebody leaks our Azure stuff, so we have our Azure credentials, I trust, like, that's okay for, I think, to share. Somebody would just be able to get into this empty Azure thing that just helps us execute commands and drop databases. But there is a line that I did draw with the certificate, since it is like, it's real world important, instead of this, which is, it's a demo environment, and I trust people enough for that. But ultimately, you know, I wanted the world to be able to trust that our certificate is signed by us, or our module is signed by us. I hope that answers your question.
You got an ooh from Kendra.
Ooh. I'd be curious as to if Kendra would create a super private repository, because I know that like there is one organization that I was about to say that I'm like, nah, that was like, oh, we are totally not going to use that. And then yeah, so it's really a toss up. I mostly trust the secrets, but you know, with SQL Collaborative, we have like what 60, let's see, all the people here, like all of these people would be able to, so 62 people would be able to access our certificate, which is not cool, whereas 62 people can access our fake Azure credentials, and that is cool. Oh, before I go, I know that we have to wrap up pretty soon. I did want to show this real quick. So I created a GitHub action for Dataverse. GitHub Actions Marketplace. I was very surprised that I'm never really surprised whenever there's not a lot of PowerShell stuff. So we have 15 results, which is great. But I was surprised whenever there was no SQL CMD, and I was surprised whenever there was like so little SQL Server stuff. So they have this one person that did create a reusable action to start SQL Server. And then I created for this presentation MS SQL Suite, which allows you to install the SQL engine. And what I found was the containers work beautifully on Linux runners, but they don't work so well on Windows runners because they're running Windows containers, and Mac is not licensed currently to run Docker, so you have to like take the time to install Docker and start Docker, so your runtime is already pretty high. But so that's a warning about the containers. Like if you could stick with Ubuntu, it's the cheapest, it's the fastest by far, and it's the most compatible. But what I did was I created a cross-platform solution that will install the SQL engine. On Ubuntu, it is Docker. On Windows, I literally go out to Microsoft, download something, and install SQL Server. And on Mac, I forgot what I do. I think I install the Docker and then I install whatever. So it just saves you all of that time if you're having to do cross-platform stuff. SQL Client is available on Windows. It's available on Linux, but not Mac. So to install that SQL package, I took care of all of that for you. All you have to do is copy and paste this code. And this is how actions work, right? You go there, somebody gives you something to just copy. So you copy it and then you paste it in. And then you could get into you could deep dive if you want. And let's just copy paste this whole thing. Let's see if my sample code works. Another good place for some SQL, some code. Oh wait, hold on. Okay, let me do. Okay, run some Ubuntu tests. Ubuntu. Test action on all platforms. That is true. Wait, what? Wait, it's not though. So, oh, that's test everywhere. I need to update my name. Ignore this. I don't know, because we're running out of time. We got like 1 more minute, so let's go ahead and run this. And this is going to install the SQL engine and SQL package. It'll run SQL CMD. And then I wish that I knew right off the syntax for SQL. Oh, you know what? Could we do, is anybody familiar with SQL package that they would know, like, can I just do this and then like version? Is that how it works? Let's ask my own. Come on. I don't have SQL package installed. Or is it running? Is it trying to do it against the local host? Is that what's happening? I just want to show y'all. Okay, SQL package isn't installed. Let's do SQL package version. Okay, let's see. No. All right, we'll just test it with this. I'm hoping that -- version works, and this will show that, like, even if it says version isn't a proper command line parameter, then we'll know. So again, you saw me paste that. It's going to go out to my repository, potato quality. If you want to see the internals of what it was that I did, I actually use PowerShell to create this MS SQL suite. And let's do this. All right. Switch entirely to new GitHub action. All right. This will be the final thing that I run. If y'all have any questions, please let me know. Again, I'm available on Twitter at twitter.com/CL, github.com/potatoquality/dataverse/actions. All right. Get CMD SQL pack. What is get CMD? Ignore this. Oops, that's the name of the whole thing. What's get CMD? Oh, get command. Oh yeah, that's actually what I was running, and then I didn't have it. They're both going to basically give the same. My tab has been I'm really excited. I actually switched to Azure Bastion for my demo machines, and I installed Windows 11, which I wasn't super pumped about, but my Windows 10, there's something slow with my tabbing lately. And so, yeah, get commenced. So it's not installed on this, however. Let's see here. No, okay, but yes, unrecognized command line argument. So that means that SQL package was installed. I just don't know how to use it right now. But SQL package is extremely helpful for doing database deployments, as is like Redgate has an option as well. And we also, for SQL package, we do wrap that in DBA tools using publish DBA DAC package. So those are a whole bunch of opportunities and options for you to run within your own GitHub action. So I hope that this has been helpful and that you have some ideas. If you do have some ideas for how you're going to use GitHub Actions with SQL Server, let me know. I'd be excited to hear about it. Oh, thank you, Voriel. You know what? I'm going to do it. Okay, while we we have like 3 minutes. I know that we have to go to the next one. Is it going to be in this same room, Jess? Do you know?
Yes, it is. We got a 15-minute break and then the next session.
Excellent. All right.
So we'll let you run over by 2.
Oh, I'm so excited. So it's going to go and it's going to download that again. And then we'll be able to end on green, which is always, it feels good. Should have renamed it from ignore this. Awesome. I'm glad that you enjoyed it, Kendra. We'll watch this final little thing.
While we're watching this, I have posted the link for feedback. If you have a couple of minutes and you could pop some feedback in that survey, it would be much appreciated.
Thank you so very much. Oh, that's really nice. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad that y'all enjoy it. I really genuinely love GitHub Actions. I actually use it. I even use it for scheduled tasks. Like every 5 minutes, I have a Twitter thing that checks my feed for abusive NBA players who beg the world to tear their @CL or ACL. And that has kept my Twitter feed clean. Look at this. I think I saw it that it's going to run. Yes. Awesome. And we're ending on green. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining me. There's endless opportunities for GitHub Actions. I'm not a super advanced expert, but I am using it from my own workflow. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm also on the SQL Slack at dbatoolst.io/Slack or aka.ms/SQL Slack. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And I've been excited about this session for a while. So thank you all.